We are barely a week into the second Trump term, and yet I feel like I have whiplash from trying to follow the news whack-a-mole he has plunged us into. If you're trying to follow the White House happenings, your neck and eyes probably hurt as much as mine do, as our attention is consistently demanded wherever we're not currently looking, like we're watching 10 simultaneous tennis matches. Why does it feel so much harder to stay on top of what's happening? Oh, right, because that's the whole point, which is why I have some serious choice words for the barrage of shit. Presidential executive orders. No, I mean shit. No, I don't know. What is the difference that has just been lobbed at us, purposefully trying to dilute our attention? Which terrible thing will we pay attention to as if as soon as it happens, some other terrible thing follows it? It is impossible. Our attention is a finite resource. Trump and his advisors know that, which is why he signed a record-breaking 26 executive orders on Inauguration Day, ranging from designating an invasion across the southern border to revoking the security clearance of former advisor John Bolton. I want to implore you to stay vigilant and never stop paying attention, to call their bluff and show that nothing will go unnoticed. But I don't know if I believe that to be true anymore. We mere mortals have our limits. This is Choice Words. I'm Samantha Bee. My guest today is the host of MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. Chris Hayes. Chris's new book is The Sirens Call, and it argues that our attention is our greatest natural resource, and Donald Trump knows that. So take a listen, pay attention, and make good choices. Oh my God, thanks so much for being here. So, okay, we're going to talk extensively about your book, The Sirens Call, but first, because the show is called Choice Words, we do have to talk about choices. So I am going to start
like
the
talking
combo.
about choices.
You do?
I do.
Well, this is the place for you. This is the play. This is the spot. Okay, so are you good at making them? Are you like a decisive decision maker? Are you like someone
I am.
who's
Yeah,
just
I
like,
think I am.
You are.
Yeah. I'm not indecisive.
Like
I am not indecisive. I am.
Really?
I am decisive. I think probably I'm. If I have a flaw on this, it's too decisive.
Oh.
A real personal weakness of mine is impatience.
Okay.
I get very impatient with long deliberative processes.
Okay.
Which is that's not a great quality. So the thing that I have going for me is that I'm decisive. I am the opposite of indecisive.
Yeah.
The flaw there is that sometimes I'm like, hey, let's just do it.
Make a call.
Let's do it. Let's make a call. But that can be bad. Right. Sometimes long deliberative processes are important.
Okay. Well, does that mean that you're going to get frustrated with like my lengthy question asking where I'm just like mulling as I go?
No. No, I'm not a jerk.
No, I know that. We know each other a little bit. World.
Yeah, that's right.
Like if you look back on the kind of the spectrum of your life, is there a big decision that you made like abruptly, let's say you chose a path quickly that you really changed kind of the trajectory of everything, that just like was the stone in the pond that rippled and changed it all. And you were like, oh crap.
I mean, this is a little bit intimate to say, but like,
I like it even more now.
When I was 19 years old, my freshman year of college, I was hanging out in a dorm room with my now wife, who I was friends with and also had a pretty intense crush on.
Yeah.
And the most decisive move I've ever made in my life is that she got up to go into the hallway where the bathroom was, and I was just like, I'm just going to go follow her and maybe try to kiss her. And walked into the hallway and literally very politely tapped her on the shoulder. And she turned around and then we started kissing.
Oh my God.
That's by far the most important choice I've made in my life.
That's huge.
the choice to do. I remember having the thought of like, because this is out of character for me.
Okay. Oh my God.
And I remember having the thought sitting there and being like, all right, I'm trying to go do this. And
and it didn't happen that she turned and then you kissed her teeth or something like
no,
that?
it was lovely.
Happens.
It was lovely.
Oh,
I won't
nice.
I won't go any further on it, but I was choosing between succumbing to fear, anxiety, and inertia, or choosing to do something decisive.
Right.
And I'm glad I made that choice.
She's very emotionally vulnerable right now. She has to pee so badly. Now's my chance. I know she has to go.
I can't believe I'm blushing. I can't believe I told that story on your podcast.
You've been with your wife a really long time.
Yeah, we've been together for almost 27 years. So we've been together. We're one of those couples. We've been together longer than we've not been together. Like more of our life is spent with each other than was spent separate. That's,
Oh my God. I think that my husband and I just crossed over into that.
Yeah.
I never even thought of that.
It is an interesting milestone to consider because when you think about what forms you as a person,
right.
Obviously your childhood is distinct and nothing can ever replace the formativeness of your childhood. I mean, 19's about as young, I have one pair of friends. They started dating freshman year of high school because we went to high school together, and they're still together. So that's really
they crossed over.
Literal children.
Wow, literal children. I always use that metric. You know what? I'm gonna use it in relationships now because I never thought of that before. But my husband and I use that in terms of fame. Where like usually when you cross over and you've been famous for longer than you weren't famous.
Oh, that's an interesting
you're
one.
Kind of a ruined person, and you should just put yourself out to pasture.
Oh, that really got real dark real fast.
Yeah, like
I've got some years left on that before I have to, in the words of Sam Bee, put myself out to pasture.
You're totally fine.
Do you think? Wait, I want to stay on this. My experience of fame, which is totally relative, and I have like some, but not a ton, which I'm super happy for.
You have a good amount. You have a very, very good amount.
It's a manageable amount. I can go to the grocery store. I take the subway every day.
You can have a healthy life.
Yeah.
Yep.
My experience of it was the hardest in the early part, and then I worked really hard to kind of acclimate to it, and it feels like it's more manageable now.
Right.
Whereas what you're saying is the longer you go, the worse it is.
Well, it's more that no, it's not that the worse it is. It's the worse you become as a person.
No, but why? That's
the more impossible your life. Well, it's just, I'm talking about like kind of that like bigger, like again.
Like movie star famous.
Like movie star famous where you're inhibited from living your life.
Yeah.
You get into a world where you sort of stop doing stuff for yourself because it actually is too hard to go grocery shopping. People stop you all the time.
Totally.
That contracts your world so much that you then become kind of it doesn't happen to everybody. Some people can do it, but it's kind of rare.
No, but I think that I totally, if you're in a category where you cannot ride the subway, go grocery shopping, take a walk around your neighborhood.
Yes.
I think that would be totally psychologically debilitating.
Yes.
And stunting.
Crippling.
And almost unavoidably so. Like even if you were trying really hard and very intentional about it and aware about it, I think that lack of normal social feedback would be pretty tough.
And the feedback of like not really having someone in your life who truly says no to you.
Yeah.
You really need like just a little bit of friction.
I sometimes when people say no to me, or sometimes when people like disagree with me, I have the twin impulse of like, what? Why are you saying no?
Yeah.
But then I have the secondary super ego being like, no, that's good. Like,
yes.
But they're both there.
Yeah, they have to exist. And I do think that like, living on the East Coast is very helpful. Friction is everywhere.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
People don't care out in the world. Like even if you don't have someone equipped in your life to be like, this is a very bad idea and here are the 10 reasons why, and we all agree that you're wrong.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have that, the world will accommodate you.
Yes.
People will yell at you on the streets.
Yes.
And on the subway.
Yeah.
No problem. We need to talk about the world at large. Mm-hmm. And I think actually your book is dropping at literally the perfect time.
Yeah, weirdly.
I mean, weirdly, you couldn't have picked a better time to launch a book about the attention economy. So your new book is called The Sirens Call. It's about one of the most precious resources that we have, our attention. This has to be just like a credit card. Like this has to be something that you think about all the time, given your job, given the world that you live in. Why did you decide to write this book, and why did you decide to write it now?
I've been hosting a television show now in some form or other for like almost 14 years.
Yeah.
The nightly show for a dozen. And the experience of that day to day is thinking a lot about attention.
Yes.
Where the public's attention is, why attention seems to flock to some subjects and away from others, how personally to grab people's attention and keep it, which is the foundational part of my job that I have to do, or that I'm not doing my job. Like everything comes after that, but the first thing I have to do is hold people's attention. And over a decade of thinking of that day in, day out at a kind of tactile craft level, started to produce a bunch of more theoretical thoughts about this and questions that I was constantly encountering. And then the other part of it is living in the world, being a person who's extremely online and has been since he's 14 years old, and also negotiating the difficulty of exerting dominion over my own mind that I think all of us are experiencing. So all of that kind of came together. And my experience of social media as a person who's sort of famous, but also my awareness that experience was being democratized.
Right.
That like the weirdness of strangers insulting you or being mad at you was a thing that very few people used to experience and is now essentially democratized for everyone.
Yes, yes, yes.
All of that started to push me towards thinking deeply about this. And then I wrote an essay for the New Yorker in 2022. And I really liked working on that. And I felt like forcing myself to think about it and to read about it was making some progress for me. And so then I want to write a book.
Right. I mean, it is your literal job to like harvest people's attention.
Yeah.
And I do think,
you too. I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Me less so now. I mean, much less so now because I'm not on television. But
right.
Never say never. Never say never. I mean, okay, like I'm paraphrasing something that you wrote in the book, but you just really said it. Like on TV, your single goal is maintaining people's attention, but now the experience of that is democratized to every teenager with a phone. Literally anyone who's on social media is experiencing like feedback, a lot of it. And the need for more feedback and likes and like all of it's degrading our human experience. Would you agree with that?
I think it's misshaping or malforming our human experience in ways. Part of the reason that I say it's the sort of most endangered resource, it's also the defining resource of our age, is that there has been this shift in our social status and desirability. I think about my grandfather, who has since passed, a guy I loved, very, very stoic, old school. He was a naval pilot and then a commercial pilot and a conservative Catholic. Like, he just grew up in a time where seeking others' attention was lowbrow. I mean, if you go back to think about performers, right, in medieval times or in Shakespeare plays, they're kind of like, they're trashy. Like, it's trashy. It's like trashy and low status to want people's attention. Traveling salesman, the Music Man, like all of that is like, we have, because partly social media and because this resource is so important, we've done a 180 in the social desirability of getting other people's attention. That is what people want to do. It's what everyone is trying to do. Achieving it confers status on you. Right. And it's always been the case that like there were stars and there were people that moved to Los Angeles to like be stars. But that was always a small, weird, distinct little group of weirdos. Right. And now it is basically everyone all the time. That we have an environment where, because we want to be paid attention to in some deep part of our beings, from the moment we come crying into this world, we need other people's attention. Right. That has now been kind of democratized and weaponized and become the coin of the realm for everyone.
I know you have kids. Are they little kids? They're still pretty young?
I got 3 school-age children. I have 13, 10, and 7.
13, 10, and 7. So I constantly, mine are a little older, 14, 16, 19. And I constantly think about the attention span of my children and how I have like neglected the cultivation of their attention span vis-a-vis my own limited attention span.
Yes.
And my own, like, it's just like fragile, just like an eggshell thin ability to focus on anything. It really looms over us. We are really living in, like, it's a narcissist's world, and we are all just living in it.
Yeah, and I think that's partly the potency of taking this thing that's so dear to us, which is social attention is the foundation upon which all relationships are built.
Right.
Like if you're in a relationship with someone, you pay them social attention, they pay you social attention. That reciprocity is what produces the foundation of the relationship, right? Whatever relationship is, parent-child, lovers, friends, coworkers. We've taken this thing. It's evolutionary, and this thing that we've taken away the mutuality that comes with this in all normal relationships, right? In all normal relationships, you're not having someone pay attention to you if you don't know them.
Right.
But that experience of strangers paying attention to you paying attention to strangers, that second one was the experience of, having some movie star you thought about or some politician. But now these unilateral relationships of social attention are everywhere.
Yes.
Because social media makes them possible. And they produce in us a whole bunch of weird psychological effects because we have not developed to have those relationships. The relationships we've developed to have are mutual ones. That's all we have.
Yes, there are so many parasocial relationships too.
Exactly.
So you are delivering, you have deliverables that you are delivering to people who like you, but a lot of people in your realm, in the realm of people you don't know who you're speaking to, think they know you and feel entitled to say stuff about your life.
Right. And the thing that we've known forever, right? This goes back far time and it links up with what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation is that like fame does drive people kind of crazy. And the part of the reason fame drives people crazy is you're just not psychologically prepared to deal with the influx of feedback from strangers.
Right. Right.
And that experience, that particular experience is now democratized for every teen with a phone. Everyone can have that experience. People have it all the time. People go viral and they have people screaming at them. Or you just have a post or an Instagram picture and then some stranger DMs you. Like whatever experience it is, that little weird experience that we've watched make people go mad forever is now an experience that everyone can have.
Everyone can have. And I think it's a little better. And it's not good for anyone. It's not even good to come at that as a fully formed adult person.
No.
It's very difficult. I'm sure it was difficult for you. I know it was difficult for me when people start giving you terrible feedback that you hold on to forever.
It's tough.
It's really tough when you're a whole person, let alone just in a very formative stage of life where you're just seeking approval, trying to figure out who you are. I remember the first terrible comments I ever got on like a chat board. I'm sure you do too. Do you? Do you hold that stuff?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's much worse for women, to state a very, very obvious point. It's bad for all of us, but it's worse for women. It's also worse for women of color. And I mean, I do get off relatively easy. Just because I'm just so likable, I think part of it. But
I think that's it.
I think it's really
the fashions. It's the whole picture.
No, I think for some reason I'm just very unthreatening to people. No, I definitely remember. I mean, I actually had this really crystal clear memory when my show first launched. People talk about parasocial relationships. People have intense parasocial relationships with hosts, and as you know. And particularly because I host a nightly cable news show, it's a very habituated viewing experience. People watch every night. It's part of their routine. Yeah. It's something I really cherish about it. Like I love having that relationship with people. But when you're the new person, there's a lot of "you're not my real dad" energy coming from the audience. Yes. And it's pretty tough to read that. And I remember being pretty shaken by it. And having dinner with one of my best friends and one of my oldest friends. And I was talking about this. He's like, will you do me a favor? I'm like, sure. He's like, just don't read your mentions. Like, literally just don't read them.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's like, promise me for a week you're just not going to read them.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I guess I could just not read them. He's like, just don't read them. And I stopped, and it massively improved my life. Like, why should I let all this feedback from strangers, this social attention from strangers into my head? It's not normal. It's not good.
It's not good. It doesn't help you do your job.
No, it doesn't help you do your job.
It doesn't help you do your job. I mean, Tina Fey talks about that, and you reference her in your book.
Oh, I
also.
love that's one of my favorite things ever. When she got up at the Golden Globes, I think, and she won an award, and I think it was for 30 Rock, and she like started shouting out troll negative commenters on the LA Times award season message board who had been like criticizing her.
Yeah, she was like, suck it.
Suck it. You could really suck it, she said. Yeah.
Well, I do remember because my first real television job was on The Daily Show. And that was joining, similar to what you experienced, joining a beloved cast of characters. And I think there is like a different energy because you use your own name. You are you. You're a TV version of you, but you're still you. And I was definitely like a character version of myself at first, but was still my name, still me. And I can literally remember a commenter named Hanzo Hattori telling me that I should go.
You remember the commenter's name?
I'll never forget as long as I live because Hanzo Hattori is kind of like in my imagination anyway, telling me that I should go walk in front of a bus. And I was like, what?
Well, that's not very nice, Sam.
What? And just like this Canadian woman who's like, this is my big chance. And then I go on the IMDb
like, oh, sorry.
and like literally step off the sidewalk in front of a bus. And I was like, oh, I think life might be changing. I don't think this is a good idea for me.
In front of a bus.
Yeah, like I agree with you that it is different for women, but it isn't less for men. It's just it has a different energy, but
it's a different
stream,
energy. Yes.
Like the fire hose is the same. It's the same quantity of feedback. It's just like slightly different for women.
It's different, and it's less toxically focused on your appearance, I would say. Is I think the biggest difference.
Sure. Chris Hayes, you're not my dad.
Yeah, you're not my real dad.
You're my real dad. I don't have to listen to you.
Exactly. It's a lot of that.
Okay, did you finish this book before? Oh, I started to sweat just even saying the next sentence. Before Trump won the election. Do you want to write an epilogue to the book now, or is this just Sirens Call Part 2?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I think the main dynamics I identify in the book have been borne out past my wildest imagination. I mean, I write about him as the sort of apotheosis of the attention age. Yeah. The single person in American public life who's understood at a deep, feral, intuitive level that attention is the most important resource, and whatever you have to do to accrue it is worthwhile. Yeah. And has dominated the national attention and wielded that for power. Elon Musk is now basically doing the same thing. Watching the inauguration where it's Donald Trump who's this sort of singular attention hound, and then Elon Musk, and then all the people that run the companies that are harvesting and extracting our attention, right? Like next to him, it was like a little on the nose.
It does feel like with those guys, though, especially with Trump. I mean, he really is, as you say, the apotheosis. Like it's just pure id. It's like in his DNA.
Yeah, it's cellular. And partly that's why he's so successful at it, because it's not theorized. He's not doing it because he sat down with a handful of consultants and they read him a PowerPoint and they said this. It's purely at the level of instinct. Yeah.
So it's a very authentic.
It is authentic. That's when people say Trump is authentic. That's what they mean. Yes. Because he's not authentic in like what he says or when he performs being a garbage man or a McDonald's drive-through person. Like that's obviously inauthentic. But what they are identifying is his keening, overwhelming, I would say pathological need for attention. is genuinely authentic, and he genuinely pursues it. And that's
Yes.
the authenticity people are identifying.
This is such an interesting topic of conversation, especially when it comes to today's politics, because it seems like it would appear that attention overrides everything else. Attention overrides money.
Yep.
Attention overrides all credibility. It is like the driving force.
Yep.
Because attention confers influence. Anyways, it's just attention
Yep.
and brand awareness.
Yep. It has cannibalized other aspects. I mean, particularly in public discourse, I think it, because it's so powerful, it kind of cannibalizes like persuasion or argumentation or like Donald Trump is not good at making arguments. Like like public life used to select for people that were very good at persuading.
Sure.
Trump is not good at persuading, really.
Hold on a second. Are you resistant to the weave? What are you saying right now?
Like, yeah, the weave. He's not particularly good at persuading, but he's just good at attention, and that ends up mattering more, and the sort of sheer bulk of it can override other aspects. But also, yes, like in the products we buy, the triumph of the brand over the product, which is something that Naomi Klein identifies in No Logo, 30 years ago. So that's everywhere in our lives now too, where the key is to grab people's attention, and the thing you sell them afterwards is more of a secondary thought, partly because industrial production has become so commoditized and so globalized. Half the time you're buying stuff from Amazon, you don't even know who's making it.
Half the time. I think it's like
9/10 of the time.
9/10.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I need a tea kettle. And it's like, well, here's the tea kettle that's at the top of the screen, right? So the thing you're purchasing it because the attentional space where you put your eyes and focus is where that product is going to live.
Yeah.
That's the reason you're buying it. You're not buying it because you're like, that's a great tea kettle.
That has everything I want.
You know nothing about it, and that's increasingly how we make consumer decisions as well.
Right. You can be Kamala Harris. You can go run out there. You can raise over $1 billion, but there is no price for attention. Attention is priceless. You can't put a money value on it.
And there is a trade between these things, right? So it is the fact that you can take money and you can purchase attention through advertising, which is what the Harris campaign did. But I think one of the lessons of that campaign was just the limitations of that. And I think they ran a very good campaign. And that's not just my subjective assessment. One of the most important bits of data to come out of that campaign that everyone needs to understand is she lost by much narrower margins in the swing states than the non-swing states.
Right.
And the reason that's important is the swing states were where they were running the campaign.
Right.
The campaign narrowed the gap. Like the campaign was a net positive. They ran a better campaign than Donald Trump did. In the overall environment, that was what boosted him to victory. And that environment was born of Joe Biden being old, and it was born of high inflation, but it was also born of the attentional saturation of Donald Trump.
And Joe Biden not being out there communicating.
The opposite. The
opposite, being hidden away.
Totally failing to occupy the bully pulpit.
Totally failing.
And again,
to
that's
occupy it.
just people will get mad at that. It's just empirically true that he gave fewer speeches, fewer press conferences, fewer interviews than previous presidents. We can count these things, and he just did way less.
Not even. It was negligible, really. So, okay, I think that the GOP seems to understand that negative attention can function just as well as positive attention, like in a brand awareness way. It doesn't always work, but it often works. You talk about people in the book who try to mimic Trump. I think of Carrie Lake, Blake Masters, how they all lost. Why do you think it works for him and not for them? Because it's so authentic?
Yeah, this is one of the great mysteries of the age, right? Which is Trump pulls this off, but almost none of the Trump-like candidates can pull it off. So people that do what he does, which is sort of trolling politics, they run far behind Trump. If they win races like Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's in totally safe seats where they win primaries.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing these kinds of candidates win close elections. So there's some price you're paying, which goes back to the insight that I think Democrats and the Democratic professional political class has is, yeah, it's not a great strategy to court a lot of negative attention because then people won't like you. That's true for these other folks and not for Trump.
I do think there's an extra ingredient. I do have a theory. Let's see
Hit me.
if it holds. I think that the extra sauce that Trump has is that people find him funny.
Yes, I think the humor and the
big.
authenticity. I think it is that he's not doing a bit. He is being that way because that's who he is.
Yeah.
As opposed to Ron DeSantis trying to be a troll. And he is genuinely funny and has comedic sensibility that leavens everything so that it's not just this like off-putting dourness of DeSantis, who is a completely humorless, like genuinely a humorless guy.
Genuinely humorless.
Trump is very funny. There's a weird ironic distance. I remember back in 2016, he goes before as early as in Iowa, and he goes before some farmer event. He's got some ethanol announcement that he's like reading off a sheet.
Sure.
And he goes like, he's like reading it. He's like, my administration will support ethanol. And he sort of interrupts. He goes, that's what you people like, right? That's what you like? And it was just, he didn't mean it as a joke. It was so funny because it was like the most flatly transactional. He wasn't pretending to care about ethanol.
No.
He was just like, you're into
this?
Someone told me you weird farmers like ethanol. So is that good enough for you, basically? And I think that weird, like this weird ironic detachment, this strange comedic sensibility is enormously distinguishing for him. Although, but here's the thing. Trump is genuinely charismatic in the sense of like the ancient Greek concept of charisma. Mm-hmm. Musk is not. Musk is not funny, and he's not.
Oh no!
He's not. Oh no!
Oh no!
He's not charismatic. He's not funny. He's a vortex charisma, and yet he seems to be pulling it off too.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I thought it was so funny when Trump called DeSantis Meatball Ron. I still call him Meatball Ron. It didn't really take, but I loved it. And that was like probably the only compliment I'm ever going to pay Donald Trump. You're right. Like Elon Musk does not have Riz.
He has no
whatsoever.
Riz. He is Rizless.
But he's so wealthy. And I do think that is
apparently that, yes.
Really another kind of key that unlocks the consciousness of the American people. There's something so aspirational here.
Yes. I think that's right too. Yes, it puts you in a different category. It makes people they're more willing to focus on you.
Yes, because they want to be you.
They want to give you their attention because they think that you're worthy of it because you're rich.
Their magic. Like people think that the magic is going to rub off on them if they just kind of sidle up to it. Adjacent to money and bad opinions, the worst opinions. I do think that I've heard you talk about this, and I think it is really very interesting point that I think, Democrats, obviously everybody's in outer space right now, but there is like a feeling, and you could certainly see it in the Harris campaign, that they still sort of believe that the quality of the attention matters versus the GOP, who seem to understand that it really is more about quantity than quality.
Yeah, the magnitude.
The magnitude, just like, again, the fire hose of attention.
Yes, go everywhere, talk to everyone, be constantly on people's minds. That's the most important thing. And, you'll take some hits. Part of it, too, is there's a self-fulfilling nature to this. So let's say you do one interview, a sit-down interview, and you say something false or misphrased or controversial.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole news cycle about that. And you don't do another interview for 3 months. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a bunch of stories about that. But if you do an interview the next day, and then the next day, or you do 2 more that night, like, it tends to wash out the negativity. This is another big thing. We're seeing this now with the first, several days of the Trump administration, and 70 or whatever executive orders and memoranda he signed. This sort of overwhelming the ability to focus.
It dilutes like the bigoted and stupid things that you say.
Yeah, and
if
even
you just say 10,000 things.
Exactly, and even if it's on the other side and you're not Donald Trump and you're not saying like genuinely vile stuff, if you're saying things that for whatever reason as a Democratic politician are a gaffe or controversial or people are hounding you about, like, if you just say some more stuff, it just pushes it down the queue.
Right.
You know?
Yes, it does.
And that's
talking.
another thing, that you put yourself in a position for people to focus on your gaffes if you don't talk that much, or focus on things you said that are controversial, whatever. Whereas if you're talking all the time, it just is harder to do that. If you're doing stuff all the time, it's harder to do that. That's the other thing. Like, if everything is finely crafted and you put it out into the world, and then, just to defend this way of thinking that I think a lot of Democrats have, which is both conflict averse. I will say this too, that I know a lot of people that work in Democratic politics, they think it's actually really important to choose your words carefully, to be precise, to not say untrue things, to be rigorous. Like that, I don't want to denigrate that as like, you dummies are out of touch, because I do think those are important and good values.
Those are great values. Do they still hold?
Are they adaptive for this age?
Are they adaptive for the age that we live in? Like, I'm not sure that, I know that, like, rigor is important. Rigor is important to you. Rigor is important to me.
Yeah.
But is it important?
We live in unrigorous times.
We live in the most unrigorous times. And I don't know that Democrats in general right now have the temperament to, like, this world.
This temperamental question is so important too, and we keep kind of circling it, and because when we talk about Trump, it is so deeply temperamental. When we talk about politicians who tried it and didn't work, it's not temperamental. In the case of like Ron DeSantis, it's almost impossible to condition yourself to not care about negative attention or pretend you don't care if you do.
Right.
And this is a key part of this and what this age selects for and the kinds of personalities it selects for. Because
sociopaths?
Well, that is one way of putting it. I mean, honestly, that's really because, if someone sat me down and said, the way to make your show more successful is to just say really offensive stuff all the time, and we have the data that shows it, I'd be like, I don't want to do that, first of all, because that's not true to who I am. And it's not what I want to do with my public platform. Mm-hmm. But also, like, I don't want people to be mad at me. Like, even if you told me, like, we're going to give you a raise and it's going to increase ratings, I wouldn't do it because I don't want that. I don't.
Yeah.
Like, at the deepest level of my person, I don't want it. And you can't pretend to be different about that than you are.
And if you do pretend, then you will absorb those bad ideas and opinions. And
if you do pretend, you get the worst of both worlds. You get the DeSantis campaign, right? Which is you're obviously inauthentic. You're sort of trollish in a bad way. It just doesn't work. And I think that's a real conundrum, because you could tell Democrats, go out there and court negative attention. It's like, well, I don't want to do that.
You can't do it. It's very hard to do constitutionally. So I'm just not sure how this shakes out in the modern era. And plus, Democratic voters honestly are a bit more fickle. Yeah. There's a little less brand loyalty, a lot less brand. Like, actually, there's no brand loyalty to speak of. Okay, well, so when you're guiding your show, by way of example, how are you selecting what to pay attention to, what to give your attention to? Like, I'm thinking of the example of the Greenland story, which obviously is pretty unserious. We're not buying Greenland.
No, I think he might try to do something about it. But the Greenland story is a great example because it was a real conundrum that we talked about. Mm-hmm. We did one segment on it, and I largely didn't do a ton on it because it seemed to me the real world implications were fairly remote. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like a stunt. Right. Now, I'm a little concerned that they're really serious about it and what that would mean if they are. But, in the first few days, this focus question, and, I think I say in the book that in a distracted age, focus is power. Right. And focus is a real hard to come by. And we've been trying to figure out, like, what do we want to focus on? Right. And not be pulled in a million directions. But it's genuinely hard because, again, there's certain things he's doing that are both distracting and also bad substantively that deserve coverage. Yeah. And so it's not like, there's a bunch of EOs he's signed that are totally vile that I haven't even gotten a chance to cover.
And you might not, because there's going to be a whole bunch more, which is really flooding the zone. Yeah. So focusing, talk about like lack of choice, forces focus. So how are you limiting the choices? Like, I don't know how you make those editorial decisions on a day-to-day basis when, like, how late in the day are you making editorial
that's
choices?
a good question.
Because the world changes.
We do a 1:30 meeting.
Okay.
But one thing that we've been kind of trying to operationalize the first few days is to do a 1:30 meeting, but also to keep one block in the show that's kind of open.
Okay.
We have an idea that we have these guests that can talk about a few different things. We can do this topic, which we'll pencil in for now, and then we'll reassess at 5.
Yeah.
To keep some. Now, if something big happens, we'll throw out the rundown. We've done that a million times.
Yeah.
That's just part of doing cable news. But that's one way we've been trying to hedge a little bit with the kind of flow of the day's events.
You do have to have you need a little buffer in there for the whiplash of this administration. Did it bring back, it was kind of haunting.
No, it doesn't feel good. It's not good.
Not good.
I don't like it.
It's not good for quality of life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working very hard to just literally do the serenity prayer, like the things I can control and the things I can't, the wisdom to know the difference. All I can do is control what we put on the show and try to do a good job of that.
Right.
And I can't control anything else. I really can't. I can't control if people like my book. I can't control if people buy it. I cannot unilaterally control if he does terrible things. As much as I would like to, or as much as I sometimes, the job can make you feel like you can. And that if you're not stopping terrible things, you're failing, which is a feeling I feel a lot. I just have to remind myself that that's an illusion, a delusion, that I cannot unilaterally, control what happens in the world.
I love the serenity prayer.
It's profound. It's a real
profound.
insight. It's a true insight.
It's a real one. I say it to myself all the time.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, serenity, please. I think, you talk about how there's such inaction on climate change because it doesn't hold our attention. It holds it so briefly. I mean, it's kind of holding it with the LA fires.
The fires, yeah.
Not that much. And I actually think that there's a small chance that people are turning off the podcast. They hear the words climate change and they go, what do we do about these very real issues, so present in our lives that people do not find to be interesting enough or perhaps too large to focus on?
Climate is a great example. I mean, I do think that the fires are so unbelievably attentionally salient, aside from being
oh my God,
totally tragic and horrible and also, fascinating in their own weird way, right? I mean, from the dynamics of how these fires work and why they spread the way they did and how difficult it is to control them. I think that really is an opportunity to talk about the climate in ways that people will be interested in, and we've done that on the show. I think it's weird that more haven't.
Yeah.
The root problem with climate change itself is that it is quite literally an invisible process. It has zero attentionally salient features in the daily accrual of carbon in the atmosphere. We can't carbon, we can't smell it. It's not even like air pollution. In fact, air pollution, smog, part of the reason that you got the Clean Air Act, part of the reason you've seen real political,
you could see it.
Exactly, real political pressure against the Communist Party in China is like people can feel it in their lungs and they can see it.
Yeah.
You can't feel the carbon in your lungs. You can't see the carbon. You can't smell the carbon. It is obviously having tons of visible effects. Hurricanes, South Florida flooding, wildfire. So that you can do. But the actual thing that's happening is actually invisible and impossible to sense. And I do think that actually has a huge effect on how compelling it is.
Do you what do you think your early life would have been like had smartphones and social media existed to the extent that it exists?
Oh, that's a really interesting
today?
Question. I don't know. I came from one of those households that was pretty intensely regulated on the TV front.
Okay.
We didn't get much television. It was pretty restricted. There were lots of things we couldn't watch.
Oh, give me an example. What were you not allowed to watch?
Like real anti-violence regime in my house.
Okay.
Like I couldn't watch World Wrestling Federation. I couldn't watch wrestling.
Fair.
I couldn't play with GI Joes. I couldn't have guns.
Okay.
And I watched a lot of public television.
Okay.
So I would imagine there'd be some version of a regime like that that would have been pretty restrictive. I think it's probably pretty good for me. I don't think we're as restrictive with our kids, although maybe that's a generational change.
Right, right. There is a sense, like, as a modern parent, that you're like, well, I'm kind of hobbling my children by, like, what is the limitation
Yes.
of restriction? Like,
It's also, there's a million more decisions to make of like when they get what device and what they can do on it and what they can watch on it. And can they chat with friends, and can they chat with friends in group chats, or can they chat with Snapchat? And is there a difference between group chat and Snapchat? And like, how do I feel about that? All these minute distinctions and boundary drawing that you have to do.
and also what I think what is not discussed enough is that we gave them free rein for a year and a half when they were not in school to do all of their learning and socializing online. It was complete. It was their only connection to the outside world and to learning for so long. Yeah. And it's actually kind of difficult to now say, well, it's bad for you now.
Yeah. I mean, there's something so perverse about, I remember sitting there and my son was in first grade on Zoom school and having a really hard time. I was like, this is literally software designed for adults to have meetings.
Yes.
Like, that's what this software is for. We are using software designed for grown people.
Yes. Who don't want to be there.
Who don't want to be there to have meetings. Like, no wonder it's not working for a first grader learning.
Oh, God. Zoom school.
Zoom school.
Oh, boy. What do you do when your kids are bored? Are you like, are you good? Are you like, play with these acorns and read
there is a lot of like,
book.
there is go read, there is go play. My oldest has so much schoolwork that she never has any free time to be bored. So she's working all the time. Yeah. And she's hanging out with her. She's really thriving. She does a lot of homework. She hangs out in real life, a lot of friends. She also does this thing, which, like, I don't want to be this sort of doomsayer about technology. Like, one of the things she does, which I think is great, is that she will FaceTime her friends while she does homework. Yeah. And I think that's awesome. Like, that's a great use of technology. Like, my blessings entirely. Like, you sit there, you're sort of socializing, you're kind of doing work. I think that's good. Is it a little distracted? Sure. But fundamentally, that's like actual human connection happening there.
It's still a group. It's still being in a group, but actually a little easier.
Yeah. So my middle child is obsessed with basketball, which I also view as a blessing. Yeah. And I think because we're like all parents in this weird screen thing, like, he wants to go play basketball all the time, and we're like, sure, yeah, let's go. I'll take it to Y, because it's not a screen, and it's out with other people. It's physical. The youngest is still in an age where she'll play with, she's playing with Legos, playing with dolls. Nice. But yeah, I think that, that the thing of telling kids, like, go amuse yourself is pretty important.
It is. Go be bored. Go
be bored or go read a book.
Yeah. When we were children, we played with rocks.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
I watched Squid Game Part 2, like season 2 with my kids, and they were like, oh my God, what is this rocks game? I'm like, guys, mommy played with rocks. That's how bored I was. That's what it was like to grow up in the 1970s. Everyone was like, why don't you go play in a gravel driveway? Are there cars? Probably. This was a delightful conversation.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it too.
Thank you so much for your book. I mean, it is dropping into our lives when it is time for us to really reflect on this and like who we give our attention to.
I really hope people get something out of it and it feels generative and social, that people have their own ideas. Maybe they disagree with parts of it. Maybe there's things they want to tell other people about it, or like have a book group and talk about. Like, I do think the social aspect of this is really key. Yes. And I hope people can use it that way.
I was trying to remind my kids when what was it that went off the TikTok? TikTok went away. My kids celebrated. They were like, we don't have to serve this God anymore. And then
I know a lot of people who felt that way.
Then it came back and they were like, well, here we go again. And I was like, you have the choice to not use it. They're like, not if everybody else is using it. Not really. But it was very satisfying for me to remove X from my phone. I felt like, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
We don't need to carry water for these people if we don't want to.
Nope.
We don't need to. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much again.
That was Chris Hayes, and I had no choice but to look up one thing. We were lamenting that no one seems to pay attention when we start talking about climate change because it's a problem that can't be seen, which made me wonder, how long have we even been talking about climate change? Well, the first mention of it is largely credited to Swedish scientist Svante Arrhenius in 1896. Oh my God. Everybody ignored him too. We've had so much time to deal with this. Anyway, thanks for joining us. I am Samantha Bee, and see you next week for some more choice words.
Thank you for listening to Choice Words, which was created by and is hosted by me. The show is produced by Svea Baron-Reinstein with editing and additional producing by Josh Richmond. We're distributed by Lemonada Media, and you can find me at RealSamB on X and Instagram. Follow Choice Words wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.